after this. So hello, everybody, and thank you for watching the Positive Talk Hour with Jeremy McDonald. That is me, your host, and I have a wonderful guest on today that was on my show, Soul Talk, my radio show, Soul Talk, about 3 years ago. She is the author of Unearthing Venus, My Search for the Woman Within, and she also is the co-author of The Heart of the Matter with Dr. Darren Wiseman. I want to introduce Cate Montana. Welcome, Cate. How are you today?
I'm really great. Thanks, Jeremy. As you know, I was caught a little bit flat-footed going, oh, this is video? Oh, my God. You should have seen my hair was like and I was in my bathrobe 9 minutes ago.
Well, you know, that's how we just roll. It's the flow, and we just move really fast with it. We're right into it. So today we're going to be talking about Cate's new book, The E Word, and just kind of give a short description. You know, obviously, throughout the show, we're going to be talking about it, but she is just the first statement here on her press kit, which I think really will resonate with everybody, is that with Donald Trump's election, decades of progressive thinking and legislation are going up in smoke. You know, and what I know is all you have to do is log onto social media to see that people are scared on both sides. You know, in our bipartisan, political system, people on both sides are scared and they're unsure of what's going on. So you can definitely see that things are happening around the world. Millions of people want to know, why is this happening? And Cate's book, The E Word, reveals the answer. So we're going to be talking about that, and maybe we can actually start off with one of the questions I know that you talked about in here. What is the ego, Cate? Because that's what I think we're going into when we're talking about the E Word. Am I correct?
Yeah. It doesn't get any more basic than understanding what the ego actually is. And, you know, we think we know what it is because we've read Freud and the ego and the id and superego and all of that. But, you know, we genuinely don't understand the nature of the ego, where it comes from, how it thinks, how it's developed. And so essentially the ego is simply our sense of self. It's our personal story, and it originates from the very fact that we are in a physical body. When the intangible source, God consciousness, I am, source consciousness, infinite intelligence, whatever we want to call it, radiates into and animates a physical body, then it animates a physical body. And the unavoidable, inescapable message that we get the moment we get spit out of the birth canal is that we are physical and we are separate. And there's 11 million bits of sensory information flood our brains every second from conception onwards. And so we can't avoid this unconscious programming, and that's what it is. It's the ego is set into motion through unconscious programming. And the first message of the first program is, I'm physical. My eyes, my ears, my nose, I can tell that, it's just, whoa, the data is overwhelming, I'm physical. The second huge message that we get from our senses the moment we get spit out into the world is, I am separate. I can tell by skin texture and air and air pressure, and I am not my mommy and daddy. I am not the breast. I am not the bottle. I have to cry and somehow manipulate the environment around me to get those outside things that I need for sustenance and nurturing and growth and survival. So the second unconscious program that is the foundation of the ego is the unconscious understanding. Implicit is, I am separate. And as we develop, I'm not a child psychologist and I'm not a developmental psychologist, but somewhere around 12 months of age, what happens is the unconscious program, I am physical and I am separate. Mommy and daddy play with us, little Katie and little Johnny, and we say, oh, Johnny, I love you. And the brain somewhere around 12 months begins to make a connection. It's like, oh, wait a minute, Johnny. Associates the sound, the brain does this, associates the sound with this unavoidable sense of I am other and I am separate. I know, I can tell I am this standalone unit. And there's no words for this. This is all pre-verbal. But this is the consciousness we swim in, Jeremy, from the very get-go. I am physical, I am separate. And then the moment we start to language, we get Johnny and mommy and daddy sit with us and play, teaching word games. I, mommy, you, Jeremy, and so we learn pronouns. I, you, and it all is about describing and exploring the unconscious program I am separate. So I learn the language of self and other from infancy onwards. And so I begin to have all of this input that validates, corroborates, and concretizes this separate sense of self. So then I go to school and I learn that I have white skin and that Felicia has dark skin, and I learn that I'm an Episcopalian, and I learn that Edward is a Hindu. Edward, that's probably not right, but you know what I'm saying. And so we get and so that's the programming of our sense of self. And it all hangs like clothes on a coat hanger on the two messages that our brains give us 24/7. I am physical, I am separate, I am alone, and therefore I'm vulnerable, which is why the ego is so freaking insecure. So that's kind of the bottom line foundation of what the ego is and where it comes from. It's our sense of self. It's our story that starts from probably conception, but let's say from birth onwards. And as we grow and develop, our story grows and develops, all hinged on this: I am physical, I am separate. So by the time, you hit college and you've got all this education and you know what religion you are and what socioeconomic bracket you're in and what your hopes and dreams and fears are, and all these things have happened to you, and that's your story. And so, ta-da! Hi, I am Cate Montana, writer. That's what we get.
So I think it's interesting because in spirituality, and not even just in spirituality, even in most self-help books, it talks about the ego. And I think that when we talk about this, people start to think of the ego as the enemy. And what do you say about that? Do you feel that the ego is the enemy, or what is it? Is it necessary for us to have it? Obviously, it's been built into our physical sense. So, I mean, what do you think?
Yeah. Great question. The ego is not the enemy.
Yeah.
If we didn't have an ego, we wouldn't have a differentiated sense of self. We wouldn't be having this conversation.
Right.
I wouldn't be able to make any sense. I wouldn't be able to communicate with you. I wouldn't be able to recognize that there is an other to communicate with. And so one of the things I have learned, and actually I learned this on an ayahuasca journey in the jungles of Ecuador, I asked for the experience of what that sensory input would be like if it was unfiltered and undifferentiated. And I don't know how long it lasted, but it was terrifying. I was actually given the experience of what an 11 million bit sensory download actually feels like. And it's absolutely, overwhelming, doesn't even begin to describe it, and totally confusing. And it was impossible to sort anything from anything else. And I understood in that moment that autism is one of the results of when the brain somewhere, I don't know, again, in developmental psychology, starts to develop something called a sensory gating system before puberty, long before puberty. And through programming, our brain, not us, our brain automatically learns what sensory data to admit into consciousness and what to spit out or just to block out. And because it's extraneous, it's whatever's appropriate and needed for survival in the moment. That's what the brain is focused on, survival above all.
Yeah.
So by the time I hit high school, my sensory gating system has managed to filter out, this is going to blow your mind, blows my mind. If I have, and you have, and all of everybody watching has 11 million bits of sensory data a second in this brain, how many bits of information consciously do you think it takes for you and me to be having this conversation right now?
2,000.
Just take us to how many?
2,000.
2,000. That's a really good guess. Nah. 50.
50? Just 50.
50! That's all.
Out of 11 million.
Out of 11 million.
Wow.
Yeah. That's all the human consciousness can process in a linear fashion. That's what we're capable. That enables us to walk, chew gum, and pay a mortgage. That's all it takes.
And some people have trouble doing that.
And so,
That's a bad joke.
oh my God. So the sensory gating system enables us to function. And the ego, our sense of self, is our story and it's our playground. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Now, am I really separate? Am I really an isolated standalone unit called Cate Montana, a woman, you know, white woman and a writer? Is this all I am? No, of course not. If anybody has read anything about mysticism, if we've heard, you know, run across the Jesus saying, "My Father and I are one," if we've know chief self, you know, what we do to the earth, we do to ourselves. If we've explored even a little bit of quantum physics, we are given the information. We don't know what to do with it exactly because these 50 bits a second little linear processing units that we've got going here for normal waking consciousness can't grok this. But we live in an undifferentiated, boundaryless, borderless, diaphanous sea of undifferentiated energy information. There's no difference in the quantum sea between my hand and the air and between me and you. There are no borders and boundaries, except as we make them in our mind to be able to have this physical experience. So the truth is I am not an isolated standalone unit. I am absolutely one with all of life. It's inescapable. And it's also invisible. I can't see it. My senses can't give me the truth, which is why, you know, the Bible talks about we see through a veil darkly. We see through a glass darkly. We do. We don't see hardly anything at all. Actually, I was talking with Marilyn Schlitz one day. I was down at the Institute of Noetic Sciences in California, actually doing a workshop a few years ago. And she showed this, there are about 65 people there. And she showed us this video, Jeremy. Blew my mind. And it was of 8 people in a hallway in front of an elevator. And half of them were dressed in white shirts and half were dressed in black shirts. And they had a basketball. And Marilyn said, okay, now this was an exercise to show us how much we don't see, okay? So she said, okay, now what I want you to do, this is going to be about a 2-minute video clip, count the number of passes between the people in the white shirts, okay? So then they start passing the ball around, okay? And so I'm sitting there busy trying to count the passes between the guys in the white shirts, and about 15 seconds in, 20 seconds in, I lose track. So I go, oh, well, hell, I screwed that up. So I gave up. In a heartbeat, in a moment, the moment I gave up and stopped counting balls, there was a guy in a gorilla suit in the middle of the group pounding its chest. And then it went, and then it walked out of the video frame. And I was just like, wow. So anyway, so the video clip ends, and Marilyn goes, okay, did anybody see anything unusual in this video? Well, I raised my hand, and one other woman raised her hands. 65 people, 2 of us saw the gorilla. And then she ran it back, and she said, okay, I'm going to run this again, and don't count any balls, just watch what's there. And everybody, of course, saw the gorilla. And everybody was pretty freaked out. And a couple people were really pissed off, oh, you cheated in this 2 different videos, and I don't believe that. And, and yada, yada. But, of course, that's the ego for you, because we have this personal sense of self, our personal story, that has arisen through all of the sensory data we've been given. And, and the sense of isolation and personal separate self makes us unconsciously incredibly self-protective, because we feel very vulnerable in these flesh suits, and very vulnerable knowing that these flesh suits can be damaged physically, emotionally. We can be deeply mentally disturbed by others. So we become very guarded of our temples, and it's totally unconscious. So there's nothing wrong with the ego. It's simply our sense of self that enables us to interact and have these amazing conversations. The problem comes, and we're seeing it on the global stage right now with Donald Trump. It's beautiful. He is the quintessential perfect example on the global stage right now of an ego that is absolutely locked into its personal sense of self, has never seen outside the box of the personal story, doesn't know that anything outside of his separate self even exists. Doesn't care.
The I.
The I, me. And that's why he's so desperate to build walls. That's why he's so insecure. He has no outside story. He has no interconnection with people. His walls are adamantine.
Yep. Look at all his money makes him feel powerful, and he's very disempowered inside.
Yeah. So that's when the ego becomes problematic. Is when the ego thinks it's it. When we have no other information available, and we have no pathways, no credible educational routes, no reasonable stories that introduce us to this larger picture of ourselves. Quantum physics has been around for 100 years now. And the understanding that, actually everything, that all of life, this piece of paper, everything really is just quantum energy information. That's been around for 100 years. And it's as if we've never discovered it, because that understanding hasn't made it into mainstream yet. Because that's the kind of information and education we need for us to stop and go, whoa, wait a minute. Wow, really? I'm not isolated. I really am. Jeremy and I really are one. And wow, what's really going on? And then that's that open question mark, beautiful space where we begin to open up the blinds and go, wow, what else is out here? And what can I know? And instead of being so frightened about, oh, I don't want to know anything, take it away, because I have to guard this precious little story I've got, whether it's a religious story, whether it's an ethnic story, whether it's a story of my woundedness, it doesn't matter. It's all stories. And they're equally valid stories. But the problem happens is when we run our lives by them.
It's interesting you talk about, because the next question I was going to ask you on your press kit is this, but I want to kind of lead into this a little bit, because I work in corporate America as my day job as a trainer, and I've been a consultant for a long, long time, or I've worked in the capacity of a leadership trainer and all that stuff. So what I find is that I mentality in corporate America everywhere. And even though the classes I teach are all about teamwork and collaboration and Stephen Covey's thoughts on synergy and all that other kind of stuff, and I just find that no matter many times people take these classes, they're not doing the inner analysis of their inner journey, or they're set to become self-aware of what's going on inside of themselves. So then it leads into the question, like I was just having this discussion not too long ago, because we were talking about healthcare, and I said, there's a lot of things wrong with healthcare, and it's not just if we have coverage or not. It has to do with greed, and the I. Nobody is stopping to say. Like I found out recently that United Healthcare CEO made $68 million last year, and I thought, what about the woman that used to work for me who made $10 an hour, and her premiums per month for her and her child were over $300. So if it just doesn't take a mathematician to know that $300, over $300 out of a $10 an hour salary. This is killing this woman. And then her deductible was $6,000. So I guess the looking into this, the question is, how does your ego analysis explain corporate greed and political corruption? And there's a whole lot going on in our country, and on both sides, I don't see anybody really saying, what are we going to do to come to the table and really create something greater than what we have now?
Yeah. It's exactly this. It's exactly this, Jeremy, which is why I wrote the book, is that there is no public understanding, no mainstream understanding. There's not even an understanding of what the ego really is in spiritual circles. We can get into that whole conversation about the search for enlightenment and what a goose chase that is. But bottom line, the reason we have corporate greed and our world structured the way it is because of the fear. The bottom line story, that unconscious program that runs us from birth onwards, is this sensory message that I am physical, I am separate. Everything at that point becomes about safety and security. Everything is about survival. Now, I talk about in the book, and I wrote the book as a primer. I wanted it to be so freaking easy for people to understand this stuff. And so, I talk about something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the book. Self-actualization. And Maslow was great. He, was the one of the developers of transpersonal psychology and fourth way psychology. He developed a understanding that the ego grows through different stages. Everything evolves in life. Species evolve, life evolves, individuals, with any luck, evolve, and so he, and what I loved about it is his basis, ground floor, this is where the ego starts from, is based in physical survival. We have to, handle our physical survival and security needs. Once that happens, then we can begin to explore and expand, and we move into a stage of function called ego function, called belonging needs. And so that's when we want to establish connection with others. We want to have a family. We want to join into community, churches, whatever. We need that belonging sense of we are hooked up, because I am this isolated person and I'm always wanting to reach out and have this connection that I feel I lack. The next level is called self-esteem function, and after we've got the family, we've got the community, now we want to look good. Now that this insecure sense of personal, I'm an isolated standalone unit called Cate Montana, and I really want people to like me, and I really want people to think well of me, because I need to feel good about myself, because I need to feel good about myself. The ego is frighteningly insecure because it's based in an illusion.
Yeah.
It's like I am one with, I am not separate, but the illusion runs me. So, and we wonder why the ego is insecure. It's a freaking story in our heads. It's a thought form. And it runs us. And it's fine as long as we know it. When we don't know it, we're screwed. So at that point, so we can take a look at our society right now, Jeremy. And Western society is obviously working at the ego evolution level that Maslow talks about, called self-esteem issues. The self-esteem level, we are trying to, have all the toys so that we feel happy with ourselves. We feel content. We're trying to satiate our fear through material grasping and holding on to things. We want the foreign cars in the garage. We want the vacation home in the Bahamas. We want the fifth home in the Antilles. The more stuff, he who dies with the most toys wins. That's the credo of corporate America. That's the credo of an unevolved ego that doesn't know that it's part of the whole, that thinks it's all about self-protection and having stuff to make it look good. Donald Trump, quintessential example of a fourth level functioning ego. So that is that. So this, I have to have more. And it goes all the way back to, you know, I have to have higher castle walls. I have to build a wall against Mexico. I have to build a wall against Islam. I have to protect and defend my little castle, my little personal sense of self, my story, because by God, it is my story and it's right. So greed is the inevitable result of this. Nobody gives a shit, basically, because how can you care about others when you haven't been introduced to the idea that you're even one with them?
Yeah.
You know, if it's all about self-protection, empathy is about the last thing you develop. You have to be kind of knocked around a bit in life to have empathy. And if your whole focus, your whole life, you know, from pre-college, you know, let's get Johnny into the preschool that gets him into the right grade school, that gets him into the right high school, that gets him into the right college, that gets him into the right corporation. You know, where is empathy building in that? Where is the emotional intelligence building in that? It doesn't exist. So we wonder why we have corporate structures the way we have them and designed the way they are. That's why they do. We do not teach. We do not inform anyone who we really are and what we're dealing with. And we're reaping the results.
You just made me smile because I'm thinking about one of the issues, one of the funniest issues, it's not a funny, it's one of the biggest issues we have in corporate structures is, especially at the entry-level position, whether it be sales or customer service or collections or whatever it is, we try to teach empathy. And I'm always laughing because I think to myself, you can't teach empathy. I mean, you can't. And you can teach wording and stuff like that, to give the illusion that you're empathetic. But unless somebody has that, you know, like you're saying, you have to get kind of knocked around a little bit in order to display empathy. It's because how could you possibly understand if you haven't been through any crisis in your entire life or any type of hardship? So one of the things that senior executives are always complaining about in every company I've ever worked with or done consulting with, is like, I'm having trouble with my employees showing empathy. And I'm like, and so we come up with all these models for empathy and all that other kind of stuff. And then the employee looks at it as a checklist. And because they look at it as a checklist, they're not possibly displaying any type of empathy. So what are we training? We're training millennials. You know, these are and not that there's nothing wrong with millennials. It's just that millennials have been given, I saw an interesting study recently, and I'm getting a little bit on a rabbit trail, but I'll be back here in a second.
No, this is great.
And millennials, when they're in school, they're given ribbons for 9th place, 11th place, 12th place, you know, whatever. They're not for, it used to be first, second, and third place. Well, they're rewarded for every little thing. So when they come into the workforce, they come in with this idea that I'm amazing, you know, and so then when things start to be tough, they have no coping skills to be able, not saying it's more wrong. I mean, there's just that's how they've been taught. And so what I'm finding now is with millennials, you have to give feedback, positive feedback, constant. Really good job on that. Hey, you know what, don't worry. I know you got a 60% on the test, but you're only 40% short of 100. You know, that kind of stuff. And what it does is then when they get the next test, then because they have that encouragement, I'm trying to teach them how to find their own inner encouragement because in school they've been taught from the outside. The outside gives me the stimulus that I need in order to get, you know, further ahead. And then when they don't get that, then they start to fail. But it's just interesting. The empathy is a difficult thing that we're having, but it's because these kids have no experience. Yeah,
and they're the ultimate unhooked generation so far.
Yeah.
You know, how much, you know, it's wonderful to have this capacity, this video capacity for you and me to have a conversation like this. And yet, you know, it's great being in studio because, you know, we can hug, we have connection, we can have a cup of coffee together, and it's a much more humane interaction. It's really fascinating because in my mind, when I look at, well, the whole world is a story and the ego is a story, and we're moving into this whole electronic story, and taking video as reality, you know, reality TV. It's like we're taking the story in a way back to its electronic information energy place. It's not really real. You know what I'm saying? It's weird the way reality is setting the stage, and I don't have and I'm not going to say that I understand how evolution is working, but I do trust life. I've come to that conclusion that life knows what it's doing, and so what's showing up is right on. Donald Trump being president is right on, obviously, or he wouldn't be there. And we are going to reap our developmental lessons from that, whatever they may be, and it'll all be good in the long run. It may not be comfortable in the short term. And
I like how you said that I like how you said that there's an article I read recently that was talking about Donald Trump is bringing out what Carl Jung would suggest as the shadow in all of us, and so you know, it's really pushing that button for all of us. And one of my friends is an intuitive. He feels very strongly that Donald Trump is going to be the one that pushes us all to actually stand up and say enough is enough.
Yep,
And
I agree.
And then we know how the universe works. It flows in a sense where it's brought this catalyst, you know, to say, wait, what's really important to me? You know, a wall is just so foreign to me and my mind. But then it's like you said, his walls are up. You know, he's compartmentalized inside of himself, so he's not even looking at himself. And that how many Americans are like that? How many times have I been like that in my own lifetime? How many walls have I built? You know, that kind of stuff. So it's really a time for the mirror. Yeah, interesting. Very, very interesting. I love the concept, you know, when you really start thinking about beyond your own reactions.
Yeah, so. Yeah. And so much of what I do throughout the book is I introduce practices, very simple practices, meditations, but also walking, talking out in the world practices that we can do to begin to sense beyond the I'm an isolated standalone unit called Cate Montana and Jeremy McDonald, that begin to dissolve that boundary, that begin to give us the experience of being in a world and one with it at the same time. We really can train ourselves to go into what I call and what Abraham Maslow referred to as the transpersonal state. And so for a long time, to get back to Abraham Maslow, the peak of his pyramid of ego development was something called self-realization and self-actualization. And that came at a point where the ego had gone through all these lower level esteem needs and survival needs and all of that, and it finally come to the place where they felt so integrated and so whole and safe within themselves that they could simply be themselves. And it wasn't, and their feeling good about themselves wasn't predicated on great feedback from teachers and mom and dad in society. It wasn't predicated on having wealth or material goods. It wasn't predicated on beauty or sexual attraction. It wasn't predicated on a damn thing except their internal desire to express themselves in the world as who they are. So your great artists, they're self-actualized. They come out and they present themselves in creation of on their terms, their way is what it's all about. Great. At the end of his life, toward the end of his life, he finally realized that there was yet another level of ego function, and he called it the transpersonal. It's after we've done all of that stuff and we've expressed ourselves to the max and hoo-ha, and it's like, and then it's just like, well, now what? Well, okay, that was nice. That was a rush, but now where does this leave me? I still feel isolated and alone somehow. And so that's when we start to lay down the walls and go, well, what else is there? And we start to go inwards. And we start to set aside this story as the most important structure going and go, well, okay, so the transpersonal is, Bernie Sanders is a great example of a transpersonal being. He is intelligent, he's fierce, he's all these things, but he's also so hooked up with life and other people. He radiates empathy. He's been there, done it, got the t-shirt. He feels for other people, and he knows that other people you know, they are just him walking in different moccasins, and it shines out of him. He's a beautiful being. That's the transpersonal mindset, is when we begin to realize that, yes, I am, you and I really are in this together. You bleed the same color. You fear the same things. You know, you worry about the same things. You yearn for the same things, for fulfillment and freedom and ease and a grace and a connection. We all hunger for these things. And it's right within us. You know, Jesus was right. The kingdom of heaven is within. But the kingdom of heaven is a state of mind. And it's not just, you know, enlightenment has gotten the big, wow, enlightenment is the thing to go for. But liberation truly can be found at the transpersonal level, once of operation, ego operation. Once we know, Jeremy, that we're more than just these isolated standalone units, once we understand what the ego is and learned how to use it, once we learn that we really are connected, we start, and we learn this by educating ourselves. We read quantum physics, and instead of just studying it in school, we learn from it as a sociological truth. Oh my God, I really am one. What I do to, you know, my front lawn, whether I chemicalize it or whether, you know, I let it run wild and natural for the birds and whatever, I am interacting in an interactive world. And that changes everything. And it's possible to train this realization. And which is what is so exciting, because I spent, God, 20 years on the spiritual hamster wheel seeking enlightenment. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of hours of meditation seeking enlightenment, only to realize that, you know, enlightenment is literally a dead end. It's the end of the self. There ain't nobody to be liberated at that point. Yes, it's the ultimate liberation, but there's no one left to enjoy the liberated state.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you just talk about that, because most people, you know, it's like, and I know that's one of your questions here is about spirituality and religion, but I would just touch on that. People pursue like that hamster wheel you were talking about, and they're looking and looking and looking, and I'm like, if you stop seeking, you know, if the kingdom of heaven's within, that's happening right now.
That's happening right now.
I'm like, so what are you looking for? And they're like, well, you know, enlightenment's the end of pain and suffering. And I'm like, but hi, there's never going to be a time in this life when you're going to escape drama, or you're going to escape adversity. And hey, you want those things. You know, they help.
You do.
They really help you with the experience. And, you know, I want to experience the times when I'm sad. And sometimes I get very angry. You know, I want to experience those times, you know, because then I grow for them. I love my joy and my passion and all those other kind of things. And even if I did that for a long time, I was like, well, I don't want to be mad. That's not a peaceful person. I wrote a book on peace. But I didn't experience peace until I learned about everything. So, so it's, So you talk about spirituality in your book, and you take a pretty tough stance on religion and spirituality. I think you've already touched on some of this, but you know, why is that?
Well, you know, I'll probably, most people who get into the spiritual camp, you know, we've turned it, the old religion, the old thoughts didn't work, the old rules and regulations didn't fit, you know, and then I did the mandatory, well, for me it was mandatory, first 30 years of my life, doing life the way I was prescribed. You know, I did the happiness formula. I got a good education. I developed a great career in network television. You know, I married into my socioeconomic bracket. I had the foreign cars in the garage and the swimming pool in the backyard. And I was, you know, and I hit the wall, and I was like, well, I'm miserable. Shit, this isn't it. And so at that point, there was only one pathway to take, because I'd done all the external stuff and I'd followed the formula. So I dove into spirituality, and I started seeking within. And I was really relatively untrained. I haven't sought out a lot of teachers. Yeah, I've read a lot of books, but basically I just kind of thought that, and I didn't do any meditation training whatsoever. I didn't do TM or anything. I thought meditation was basically simply looking within, wanting to know the answer to who am I. So that's what I did. And I started on that path back in God knows when, 1980. And, you know, fast forward 17 years, and I'm kind of lean in person. If I do something, I do it pedal to the metal max. And so I, you know, when I learned to meditate, when I decided to meditate, I quit my network television job. I took all of my savings. I went and lived in a one-room cabin in the woods in the middle of nowhere in the North Georgia mountains with no indoor plumbing and no running water and no electricity. And with my dog and my cat and a Lipizan stallion. And, you know, and I lived in the woods for 3 years and meditated my ass off. And had some amazing breakthroughs and out-of-body experiences and lucid dreaming and levitation and all this wonderful stuff. And so I just like, man, I was on it. I'm going to be enlightened because I bought the story that enlightenment was something that I could attain and that enlightenment was going to give me peace. I was finally going to be happy. I was finally going to break out of this isolated standalone unit called Cate Montana. I was going to be able to move past that ego story and finally find peace and happiness and generosity and connection. So, you know, that was sold as the answer. And so I pursued it. And then fast forward 17 years of intense inner work. I mean, I organized my entire life around my spiritual pursuits. I became a journalist so that I could write from home, so that I would have more time to meditate. And so in 1997, the big breakthrough came when I walked downstairs to my meditation pillow one morning at 4 a.m. And I just stood there and I looked at it and I just was like, screw it. And that's not what I said, but you get it. And I was just like, I'm so done. And I just plopped down on my pillow and closed my eyes. And then just, it was just like, I just disappeared. It was like, and I have no idea how long it lasted, but when I came back, it was like the biggest cosmic joke in the universe. I realized that enlightenment was, yeah, because this place was so peaceful and so expansive and all-inclusive, and it was absolute unity consciousness, oneness. I am, period, full stop. And then I Am Cate came back and looked at that going, oh my God, that is enlightenment. Holy shit, what do I do with this? I can't have that because that is the absence of I. That's the absence of me. There's no way I can attain it. And trying to attain it just solidifies the I, the personal self that's trying to attain something. So surrender was the gig. And of course, don't you know, I spent about the next 2 years trying to replicate that surrender experience. But eventually, you know, it became a steady, when I finally did learn to just give it all up, that's when, you know, the whole meditation thing opened up this non-dual consciousness. But there was a huge fly in the ointment, Jeremy, because it's just like, how could I reconcile? And then the moment I would open my eyes and get up off my meditation mat, there was the Cate Montana show all over again. You know, and all of Cate's issues and her fears and her foibles and desires and all of that was just like, man, it was just in my face. And it was in my face even more in comparison to that piece on the meditation mat. So it took me another 10 years, God, yeah, another 8 years to come to the understanding that there's actually a middle path. And that's why I wrote the E word. Actually, I rediscovered the whole transpersonal state of consciousness as this, wow, it was like, talk about a lightning bolt, Jeremy. It was like, oh my God, there is a way to experience the liberation we crave and the oneness and the connection we yearn for while we're still ourselves. And we don't have to become enlightened because we can't anyway. So it's nothing you can do. You cannot attain it. It happens. It's a natural progression that happens of itself. And it's death. And look, I mean, you can face it. The ego goes out one of two ways: death by enlightenment or death of the physical body.
Yeah. And I think it's such a, that you should, it's interesting you talk about that, because it's something, another path, death by enlightenment, is the preferable way to go. It doesn't matter the way you go.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't really matter. It's either way, you're going to leave this experience, but take this experience with you too, because when you think about all the stories about near-death experiences, people always talk about, they do their life review, so their life goes with them. They don't lose this memory. So
right. Well, you know, it's different in that, you know, near-death experiences and things like that, the ego is still intact, and the story is still intact, and the belief that I am the ego and the story is still intact. In enlightenment, the ego does not continue on, because the ego is seen to be the story, the fabrication, the illusion that it is. There's no holding on to illusion.
Yeah.
There's no, why would there, and there's no self to hold on to the self. So the illusion is gone. The dream is over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent stage right.
Real quick, I want to actually show everybody your website real quick, if you don't mind. I'm just gonna grab the screen here for a second. So just give me 1 second, and we're gonna show your website, everybody. So her website is www.catemontana.com. So that's CateMontana.com. And as you can see, this is her website. She's got stuff about her, links to go to the E-word. Also her other books and projects that she's worked on, her blogs, stuff about press, articles, and contact and subscribers. So you can definitely go on here. Looks like the book is being sold on Amazon.com, Books A Million, Barnes and Noble. So there's a lot of good stuff on here for you to get to know Cate. And so just go ahead and check it out. It's www.catemontana.com. And then I'm going to take us back to showing Cate and myself. But, you know, it's, I just think it's important for them to know where to find you.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
So
that helps.
It does, absolutely. So, you know, I was just thinking, we're talking, you know, these are deep concepts that people don't think about. You know, and it's interesting when we talk about enlightenment and the ego, and the I or Cate or Jeremy. And I think that people are trying to escape the I and the Cate or Jeremy. There's nothing wrong with I. You know, I just sat with a spiritual teacher not too long ago, and he was saying, all you're saying is I. And I'm like, I get what you're saying. There is we. There's also I. And in this experience that I'm talking about, I was very relevant. You know what I mean? And so, do we, you know, are we in your perception? And I think that maybe we're probably at least close on similar thinking here. Is I think that what happens is we're trying to escape I, or trying to escape Jeremy. And right now, I am more than this body, but I also am this body. You know, this is the illusion, and also there's this experience out here. And I don't want. I actually enjoy this experience. I have fun with it, you know. And I think that, you know, that's what the experience is all about. Is it's this amazing roller coaster. Sometimes it's a horror movie, sometimes it's a drama, sometimes it's an action, and sometimes it's, most of the time, it's a comedy. And so, you know, why escape something that has so much rich experience until it's time? So you know.
Well, you know, it's unfortunate is that most of the time you have to have a certain perspective for it to get to the comedy place. And I agree, it really is a comedy. But, you know, for a lot of people, probably the majority, it's a tragedy. It's a very, very painful place to be, this planet, when we don't know who we really are. And even in the, you know, and I'll be... Look, I haven't got it set in stone. No. I'm going through a huge meltdown right now as far as my ego structure is concerned, because for 30 years I've been a writer. That's been my absolute self-identity. And I'm at the place where I'm having to dissolve that. ego identity, and it's very, very painful. Move into the teacher coach role, which is completely foreign to me. I just thought I would crank out books for the rest of my life and everybody would buy them and live happily ever after. But the truth of the matter is Cate Montana, was overtaken by the larger self. You know, I hate talking like this, but language leaves us no alternative to speak in terms, but you know, what I call the I am, that which I really am underneath this persona, basically just overtook me 2 years ago. And you know, the message was, sit down, write what you know, write about the ego, write about, you know, what enlightenment really is. And I was like, oh God, I don't want to be a teacher, please. No, don't make me do that. So, but now I'm facing that I have to do that. So, and it's hard. That's my point, is that it's painful. So, you know, even when we think we've got all of it together, it all falls apart, because, you know, that's also you live long enough, it all will fall apart, because that's how life works. It's a sine wave. There's those bloody peaks and those, well, wonderful peaks and those bloody valleys. But if, you know, when you have enough perspective, then the pain of it is so less, because we can move through those valleys and understand them. And actually, one of the things I'm realizing right now, and one of the things I want to teach about, is that depression, and I'm not talking about clinical depression, but we try to dodge the depression bullet, that horrible kind of like sludge-filled state where we just like, bleh, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't like life, and everything sucks, and you know, and it's we don't want that. So let's go have a, you know, tequila at the bar. Let's go watch some videos. Let's go whatever. We want to escape that. But I'm beginning to understand, Jeremy, that depression is this amazing creation space where we are really unhooked from our stories for a little while, because our stories suck at that place. You know, we're really not attached to our stories so much in those depressive moments. And that's great, because that is the opportunity for a rewiring, for a reworking of who we are and who we want to become. So I'm beginning to explore the whole depression as a gateway thing. So I'm actually, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm very excited about hanging out my teaching shingle, because I'm being given so many insights into how this ego works and how it can be trained and how we can learn to be so much happier. Once we know what the hell we're dealing with, my God, then the gloves are off. Then there's no more fantasy land. Then there's no more illusion. Then there's no more chasing these ridiculous balloons of, you know, satisfaction through having material goods, or satisfaction through being an enlightened teacher on a stage someplace. It's just like, wow, let's get on with really living happy, joyous, connected, fulfilled, creative lives.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're teaching, and I think it's interesting. I mean, I think we all go through those phases. I think that's part of the reason why you'll see from people later on in life, that's like, I've had 3 or 4 careers in my life.
Oh yeah,
you know, and it's
absolutely.
because they start to evolve. So my career for almost 20 years has been corporate trainer, and so so I'm going through at 42, getting ready to turn 43. I'm like, I love teaching, and I don't have any fear of standing in front of people. But you know, I've wrote 1 book, and I'm like, I really enjoy writing, and I still want to teach, but I really want to do more writing. So it's interesting, because, you know, as you start. Bless you. Are you okay?
No, I'm good. I just inhaled a little bit of water.
Okay. So as that happens, experiences come up. You know, I'm sure that you can relate to that. Experiences are coming up for you to teach, and as that comes out there, which is sort of quite extraordinary. Yeah.
Well, what's so cool, Jeremy, is that when we can loosen the boundaries of the ego and we start to move into this transpersonal space, because our story, it has less of a grip on us, we become so much more fluid.
Yeah.
And the capacity, because, you know, and I teach this in the book, there are so many simple ways to access who we really are. We don't have to read 1 million books. We don't have to meditate for a zillion hours. We don't have to have a teacher for this and a coach for that and a this for the other. It's just like, if we could just get in touch with the simplicity of I am. You know, our whole lives we build on story. Hi, I am Cate Montana. I am a human being. I am a woman. I am a writer. I am a Democrat. I am a Leo. I am, you know, my Enneagram. It goes on and on. Story, 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 story. If I just say, I am, there's this spaciousness that arises energetically from that. You know, for a couple of seconds, if we just say, I am. And then there's this blank spaciousness. And that's who we really are. The moment the mind rushes in and goes, well, that's too simple, and you know, whatever the mind says, whatever our story is, you know, that when it rushes in, it rushes in. And but tapping into that simple state of I am is what it's all about. And I talk about it in my book. I do practices to access I am in the book. And the glory of it is, doggone it, Jeremy, is I'm watching how easy it is to start to shift once I can take off the mask of Cate Montana, and instead of trying to improve Cate Montana, this is the trick about manifestation, and this is the problem with most self-improvement, is we're trying to fix an illusion. We're trying to... Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's funny.
And we wonder why it doesn't work very well.
No.
So we're starting from this illusionary structure called the ego anyway. And yes, it's wonderful. It's our story, and we'll have it until the day we, as I say, die from enlightenment or die the other way. But we can thin it out and expand it to the place where we're not identified with it and we're not stuck in it.
That is funny. So, let me think. I'm still laughing about we're trying to.
Yeah, sure. Well, let me give you an example. And here's how simple change can become. It's like if we can tap back into this quantum soup, this simple state of I am, then we take off the Cate Montana show hat and I am. From this relaxed, open, spacious, unidentified place, unstoried place, I can create anything. Right. The more I work my mind and have the experience of being more connected and less Cate Montana, less habituated to the story, a little bit more spaciousness, then I can change. Cate Montana, here's a great example, was terrified of speaking in public. I had a story, Jeremy, because Cate Montana, I love it, sounds so schizophrenic for me to refer to myself in third person, but it's, you know, but I'm really getting to that place where it's just like, I'm not her. Jesus. Anyway, so I'm about to go out on stage for the first time to talk about the E word. And I'm freaking terrified because Cate Montana has a story of when she was 8 years old in her first piano recital, she totally screwed it up and was mortified in front of God knows how many people. Then in grade school, I stood up in front of the entire school to give a report on San Domingo and some guerrilla warfare going on. And I totally blew it. I froze and couldn't say anything. Third time I did it was in high school. I forgot my lines in a musical. Horrifying. All three of them horrifying. So spit out the end result. Cate Montana has a story of I am frightened to do public speaking. So I'm about to go on the stage and do this. I'm I'm looking around for a trash can to throw up in. I'm so terrified. And all of a sudden it was just like, wait a minute, I just wrote a freaking book on this. I'm not Cate Montana. That's her issue. And I kid you not, Jeremy, the moment I got the right perspective on it, it was like, it was done. And I walked out on stage and I haven't had a single, it's no longer an issue. It's not my issue.
That's awesome. You know,
God.
My first time speaking in public, I was 17. And I laugh because people say, well, I tell people I was actually a shy kid. And they're like, you can't be a shy kid. You have a radio show, you're speaking to people and all that. Uh-huh. I'm like, well, the first time I spoke in front of people, I peed my pants. I was so nervous.
Oh, wow,
so, I mean,
yeah.
and then my second time, I was 22, and I was starting to do my train the trainer stuff,
Mhm.
and I was so nervous my legs were shaking. So I get the
Yeah.
fear, but once you do it, there's something that just happens, and it is like you're talking about. It just shifts inside of it, and you're like, well, that doesn't. And so like public speaking is like the biggest fear. Like sometimes it's rated higher than death.
Yeah.
And so if you can overcome public speaking, like the illusion just becomes, what
Yeah.
was I afraid of in the first place? Why
Well,
was I afraid to walk up to the person I thought was attractive, or,
yeah.
get the job that I wanted? What is it I'm so afraid of? So
Absolutely. You're afraid of that ego structure is afraid of getting dissed.
yeah,
It wants to look good. It wants to feel good about itself. And the beauty of it is when we start to move into this transpersonal consciousness, when I walk out on stage, I am one with the crowd. I know I am with them. I know that they are me and I am them, and that the message is about opening that door for people.
Yeah.
So, God, what's to be afraid of? I'm just talking to myself in a very real sense.
it's funny when the next time you go out, think about this. There's, I don't know how many people, 1,000, 100,
Uh-huh.
10, say, really, I'm a teacher, but I've got 500 teachers sitting right in front of me, and I'm one student. Because it's always reciprocal.
You.
So
Yes.
that's fun.
Always
So,
reciprocal. Absolutely.
Is there anything that you would like to mention before we end the show?
No, I think we've covered a lot of ground. I think we've galloped across a lot of ground.
Galloped a lot. It doesn't seem like it's been an hour, but it's been an hour. So it's been great, as usual. So everybody, just remember CateMontana.com, and I think you'll really enjoy her book. She's a wonderful light on this planet.
You can have it here. Da-da-da!
Oh yeah, that's awesome. You got a copy right there. That's awesome. And now they get to see it, as opposed to when I had a radio show, they can actually get to see it. So.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
So thank you so much for everybody watching the Positive Talk Hour, and you can check out more about me at jeremymcdonald.net or at soultalkradio.org. And so many new episodes. I have been on a sabbatical from doing shows for about a year, and you are my first show I've done in a year. So I'm getting back into doing something I really enjoy. So everybody have a blessed day, and well, thank you.